Hey everybody, welcome to TV guys. This is Paul and Mike, and we just decided that since we've been on here enough times, we don't need Matt and Brian anymore, right, Mike?
That's true. That's true.
Yeah,
They,
I think
they weren't contributing anything new.
yeah, we've heard everything that they've had to say. Nothing is really that important. In fact, if we really miss them, I'm sure you could probably talk about Power Rangers or Muppets a little bit if you needed to.
I actually did spend quite a bit of time talking about Muppets this week. Someone dared to play the Rainbow Connection that wasn't Kermit's version, and I thought if Brian Jones were only here, he would turn
Yeah.
even redder and explode.
See, we absolutely do not need them anymore, and we're not even going to worry about what happened to them and where they. Was that you, Mike? I'm hearing.
No, that was not me.
What's?
Oh, hey guys, how's it going?
Hey, how did you get? Where'd you come from?
Well, you threw some rope around me and then said stay here, but you didn't tie anything, so I've just been hanging out.
Oh
yeah, you forgot that you actually. I realized you tied my my mouth shut, but you forgot to tie my hand, so I could have just undone the tape myself.
Well, I just assumed that you wouldn't figure that out.
For anyone out there, I just want you to imagine what it looks like for Brian's mouth to be tied shut. Think about that for a minute.
Well,
let's start the show.
I guess since you guys are here, you can join the podcast today.
All right.
You have our blessing.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TV Guys, the show that has more in common with the ambiguously gay duo than it does with Batman and Robin. I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
I'm Paul.
I'm Mike.
You guys didn't want to be associated after that intro?
I'm protesting. I was first.
I'm out. I don't want to take over anymore. Hey, so it is March Madness. Actually, by now, it's going to be middle of April, maybe end of April. So you guys all know who won March Madness if you follow basketball. And then you'll be not surprised at all. But we always do this bracket sort of challenge. And so I'm excited to bring back our longtime guests, Paul and Mike. They've been on for, I think, most all of the other bracket challenges, as well as...
Well, Mike was on for all of them. Paul was not on for the first one, but they were both on for the last one.
Brian, when I want you to fact check me, I'll point to you.
This is why I keep a document so I can fact check.
The fact that I wasn't on the first one, it was a travesty, and so you guys decided to rectify that going forward.
I don't remember the content of it.
Signs.
I don't remember the content of it, but you did send me an angry text, me and Brian, about, all right, listen, you didn't give enough credence to the Final Four or what.
No, it was because it was protagonists, and we didn't give enough love to Ted Mosby.
Well, that's
what it was.
True. He was put on. Was he on both the protagonist and antagonist? Because
it was not that you didn't give enough love to him; you just trashed him, as if he has no redeeming qualities.
And that's giving too much love to him, in my opinion.
Well, that's not what we're talking about today.
No, we're not. We usually go pretty long in this, so I don't want to take a lot of time for our fun little beginning that we have. But I did see, and I just had to highlight it, one of the best episodes of Community is back in the lineup. If you watch it on Peacock, they have the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons episode on Peacock. So if you're like, I've missed it, go watch it there.
Is it? It's still off of Netflix though.
I think it is. Yeah, from what I can understand.
One of the few times I still have. I rarely watch physical DVDs anymore, but I'm glad I have that for that show, just for that episode alone. And I checked. Ted Mosby was on both our villain and our protagonist brackets.
He is not on our sidekick list.
No, he's not.
We did do less sidekicks than we typically do, just so we can spend a little bit more time. If you've watched our bracket episodes or listened to them, you probably have felt like maybe, because we feel this way, we've gone a little fast through them because we're like, we don't want it to go 2 hours. So we're going to take a little bit more time with them by parsing down the list to about half of what we do. And so we have, I'm just going to run through them real quick because we don't have too many. We've got 16 contestants here for our sidekicks. We've got Coach Beard, Dr. Wilson from House. We've got Charles Boyle, Launchpad McQuack, Grogu, Marshall Erickson, Sidney from The Bear, Patrick Starr, Barney Fife, Gilligan, Dwight Schrute, Richard Alpert, Blue from Blue's Clues, Al Borland, Turk Turkleton, and Jesse Pinkman. And so we're going to kick it off. We're going to we're going to start off right away here. We've got Coach Beard versus Dr. Wilson. And so who nominated Coach Beard?
That was me.
All right. What do you love about him?
So I'll make a pretty quick and simple case for Coach Beard. One of the things that I loved in the final season of Ted Lasso, one of the few things that I loved of the final season of Ted Lasso, was how they really dove into the relationship of Coach Beard and Ted Lasso, and how they showed why Beard was so loyal to Ted, and how when he was in a really low spot, Ted stayed with him and helped him out of that dark place, and got him back to where he needed to be. And as a result, Beard is unfailingly loyal to Ted Lasso. He is the ultimate sidekick. First of all, he's the only one in that little coaching duo that actually spent any time learning about soccer and tactics and all that stuff, where Ted was more the motivational guy. But he took his responsibility very seriously. He was loyal. He supported him. When Nate betrayed them, Beard was probably more upset about it than Ted was. And he's also a fascinating character, and he's a lot of fun, and he's a really smart character too. So not only is he a great sidekick and a great partner, he's a great character as well. I think he's a slam dunk. He's my top seed.
Sounds good. I nominated Dr. Wilson from House because I really enjoyed his character of what he brings, especially compared to House. He's a good character on his own, but he's a fantastic foil for House. He is loyal to a fault that even some of the way that he's loyal, maybe he shouldn't be as loyal as he is with how reckless House can be. But there are definitely times House manipulates him, but there's a lot of time that you actually see Wilson sometimes get the better of House, that sometimes he can rise to that intellectual challenge. He's the only one in the hospital, probably in his whole life, that House actually respects and will listen to his opinions. And that is a huge deal for someone who's as conceited and self-assured as House is that if there's one person who can maybe change his mind, it's going to be Wilson. And so besides all of that, he has a great heart. He's in oncology because he cares about the people that he works with and that he has as patients. And so he is a good person overall, but he's a wonderful sidekick. And so I'm going to say my vote is going to be on him because Coach Beard is a little too absurd in the personality traits where Wilson's a bit more grounded. Apart from that, there's a lot of similarities between the both of them.
Well, I'm clearly voting for Coach Beard. I think he's a favorite on this list to go all the way. So he's my choice.
All right, Brian Michael, what do we got?
I'm gonna have to go with Paul on this one. I'm gonna have to go with Beard because you said he's absurd. However, he is absurd, but that doesn't have anything to do with him being a good sidekick. His absurdity is it's either irrelevant or a benefit to how he can just yes and Ted Lasso in anything he does.
What do you think, Mike?
Where I'll agree with Paul to start is that Beard does make for a great partner for Ted, but on his own, I don't find him to be that charming or funny. As a whole rounded character, just as part of the partnership as a sidekick, that maybe you could give it to him. Dr. Wilson, on the other hand, a little bit more of a Dr. Watson character from the little bit of House I've seen. And I feel like the homage there is to a classic sidekick duo. And given that I gotta agree, I found Beard's humor just to be too out there for me. I'm going to decide that it's fun to start with a tie.
Okay. All right. So we have our very special patented tie-breaking dice that Paul is going to be rolling. And even though we can't see him roll it, we know in our hearts a pastor's not going to cheat. He's not going to lie.
Right. Okay. So, odd is Beard, even is Wilson. I'll show you even. It is a 5. So Beard is moving on.
I've always said about things like this, if someone lies about something this stupid, they've got bigger deals in life than that. So, all right, Beard moves on. I'm not heartbroken about it because of a couple different reasons, but we will continue on. We're going to compare Charles Boyle with Launchpad McQuack. And so, Brian, I think yours was Boyle.
It was.
Why don't you start with him?
I mean, it's just such an obvious duo with him and Jake Peralta. He is always there. I know I said yes ending for Beard. That is what Boyle does to Jake. It takes a lot for him to ever say anything negative or go against Jake. He basically looks at Jake like he's the puppy dog following him around. He is always in for whatever he wants. He's his best friend. He'll do whatever he needs for him. He is a clear sidekick to Jake as the leader.
All right. Well, we have got a character that's a deep cut for us. We love having people on to talk about guys we've never brought up on this show before. So from the top rafters, Launchpad McQuack jumps into the ring. Mike, what do we got?
All right, so someone who's a sidekick not just on one show, but actually on 2 classic animated shows. So first originating in DuckTales as Scrooge McDuck's pilot. Scrooge brings up that what he loves most about Launchpad is that he's cheap, and so therefore you get started with the easiest humor there is that he's not particularly good at his job, but he's cheap, and he does serve as the main adult sidekick to Scrooge on his adventures, someone who is better with the children. And he was such a popular character that they moved him on to the spin-off Darkwing Duck, which is basically a wannabe Batman show, where he doesn't quite play the Robin, but it's kind of a little bit of still in that pilot role, but he actually is labeled officially as a sidekick in that, and is kind of the one that's always getting Darkwing out of sticky situations, and eventually is actually doing a little bit of costumed vigilantism.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've watched DuckTales and Darkwing Duck, but I did love them as a kid. They were near and dear to my heart.
Everybody loves Launchpad.
My critique is more in Darkwing Duck than he was in DuckTales. He became a little bit too of the bumbling sidekick for Darkwing. That it's kind of the Shaggy and Scooby-Doo sort of thing, where it's like they're the ones who solve the mystery a lot, but it's through like sheer accident that they subdue the bad guy. And whenever that was Launchpad McQuack subduing the bad guy, it was quite frequently he messed something up, and then he'd come to the rescue. Meanwhile, Boyle he's got all the charm of, not all the charm. He's got all those same qualities I liked about Wilson and his loyalty, but that he just has this exuberance and this unflappable demeanor that nothing really tends to bring down. And I give my vote for Boyle because of that.
And he is a good cop too.
He is.
So I'm actually struggling with this one because I don't particularly. I have both positives and negatives for both of these characters. I love DuckTales. Like that is such a great flashback. Launchpad.
No one say anything bad about DuckTales.
Yeah,
no.
Launchpad's probably not my favorite character in DuckTales or in Darkwing Duck, but he is entertaining. I agree with Matt. I think his flaw is he's a little bit too dopey. And then the issue that I have with Charles, maybe in contrast to Beard, is Beard, I think, has a little bit more of a willingness to confront Ted, and to kind of be that, the objectionable one. He's not quite as much of a yes man. He's not kissing his butt quite as much. Where Boyle is just over the top affectionate, and that kind of rubs me the wrong way occasionally. But I'm gonna go Launchpad on a coin toss.
So, Brian, we said before the show started that we might not vote specifically for our own in some of these matchups. So, Brian, Mike, are both of you voting for your own character in this?
In this one, I am, yes.
Okay.
Oh,
So,
yeah,
we've got
well.
another tie.
Another
Oh my
tie.
gosh.
Wow. Okay, so odd is Boyle, even is Launchpad.
Come on, Boyle.
It is odd. It's a 5. So
Good.
Boyle advances.
Although that would be the most Launchpad McQuack thing for him to just make it on the dice roll. All right. Well, we have got like 2 extremely lovable characters up next.
Yeah, we do.
Grogu versus Marshall Erickson, both characters that you kind of just want to give a big hug to. Who picked Grogu? Was that you, Mike?
That's me, yeah.
All right. Start us off.
So I think Grogu is maybe one of the more peculiar ones on the list, in that his partnership with the Mandalorian, he is the most vulnerable and the most powerful at the same time in that relationship. He also is definitely, most of the time, definitely not the comedic relief. He has a little bit more of kind of a damsel in distress kind of thing going on. However, he makes that show. There was a reason that they kept that character under wraps until the show debuted. I don't think there's any other character on the list that's generated anywhere near the revenue that Grogu has for Disney. That character is far and away the show might be called The Mandalorian, but Grogu is the star of the show. I mean, most people, just so we're clear, we're talking about Baby Yoda here, since that's the name that most people would know him as. And so, yeah, while his matchup with Marshall Erickson, you're right, is 2 very lovable characters. He's definitely a little unusual as a sidekick, kind of morphing from being the character that needs to be rescued into being kind of that best friend, almost pet, into becoming kind of more of a son-father relationship.
Yeah.
Nice.
I'm gonna, even though I have Marshall, I'm gonna add to the Grogu commentary. I think Mike's right that he's probably the most significant character on that show, even though it's called The Mandalorian. And without even saying anything, like I don't think he really speaks the first season, if I'm remembering right. So it's like just having, puppy dog eyes, but he's such a great character. And but Marshall is definitely the most beloved character from the How I Met Your Mother series. And he's not only a good sidekick to Ted, which is kind of his primary role, he's also a good sidekick to Barney, and he's a good sidekick to Lily. And I mean, he's pretty much in the supporting role in every relationship, because he's that guy. He's just the nicest guy in the world, and he always does and says the right thing, and he very rarely thinks about himself first. And it's pretty hard to say anything bad about him. Plus, his character's from Minnesota, so it's pretty hard to fault him there. He's got a lot going for him.
Agreed. I do not disagree about anything that you guys said about Grogu. Absolutely super important, to the point that, maybe Mando's a sidekick. I don't know. But Grogu is a great character, is very endearing, but he is, to me, that version of an animal sidekick almost. I know he's got a lot more cognition than an animal does, but you get that feel. And for me, I just think that Marshall's the more rounded character, and that the way he plays sidekick, because you also brought it up that Grogu is also partial the damsel in distress at different times. And that Marshall is quite frequently the guy that if Marshall wasn't part of that group could easily fall apart. I really don't see it sticking together without Marshall. And for him to hold them all together and to be so relationship based and so connection based, he gets my vote for this.
Yeah. When I first saw Marshall on our list, I was not going to vote for him, because I was thinking, but to make it clear, I am going to choose Marshall, so Marshall's going to pass on. The negative I thought of Marshall initially was that you think of Marshall as the sidekick because the show is told, like, literally from Ted's point of view, And there may be some instances where some storylines where Ted might be the sidekick to Marshall, or Barney might be the sidekick to Marshall in some episodes. But I agree with what you're saying, Matt, that he is like the emotional center of the group, and like he does kind of like bounce around, and he is like the sidekick to everybody at the same time. Well, even though at times he can be the lead, depending on what storyline you're talking about.
Yep. All right, and then Paul, you did praise Grogu, but you're picking Marshall yourself.
Yeah, by a hair. And honestly, that was one I was kind of on the fence on. But, honestly, you guys convinced me. So
I understand. I thought about switching sides too.
Join the dark side. All right. Next, we have Marshall's father, Patrick Star. I'm sorry. No, that what? I've got other trivia. If that was what you thought the trivia was going to be.
People will know this. Yeah.
So we've got Patrick Star versus Sydney. We talked about her last week in our episode of The Bear. And so if you haven't seen that episode or listened to that, make sure to check it out. The Bear, it's awesome, and our episode is great. So who picked Patrick? Was that you, Brian?
That was me, of course.
You
it was me.
goof. Of course it was you.
Okay. Set aside what you feel, because I don't think everyone on our list is a huge fan of SpongeBob, and that's fair.
That is correct.
Okay? That's fair, but we're not talking about whether you like SpongeBob as a show. We're talking about, is Patrick a good sidekick? It's two different questions. All I have to point out with is the SpongeBob movie. Okay? SpongeBob has to go on this whole journey to get the crown, blah, blah, whatever. And who goes with him, even though he doesn't have to, is Patrick. Patrick is always there for SpongeBob. He will do anything SpongeBob asks. Yes, he is dumber than a box of rocks, and he has no intelligence, but he has the loyalty, the courage, and like the love for SpongeBob as his best friend, and he will pretty much follow him to hell and back, and that is Patrick's character. The show might not be great, but as far as sidekicks go, I think he's a slam dunk.
He's a slam dunk if you are holding a moldy turd and trying to shove it into a big container. That's that type of slam dunk. Because
he's literally being slammed.
He is. Listen, Sydney is a character that you don't. This is where I think we have to decide in our hearts, what is our definition of a sidekick? Is it a yes man? Is it a little puppy that's going to follow you all around and doesn't know when to stop getting abused by you? No, you have a character like Sydney who is smart and confident enough to work through her own crap, because she's got plenty of her own baggage, but she still goes after what she wants, even despite all the failures that she's had. And she is a great support to Carmy because she doesn't take his crap, but at the same time will believe in what he's doing. And so she has great business acumen for what he's needing. And she was able to fill these spots that Carmy didn't realize he needed filled. And so she had a lot of great ideas. She's not willing to stand up she is willing to stand up for those ideas. And she's a different kind of sidekick because she provides, of all these people, there's a lot of yes men on our sidekick list, and she is not that. But at the same time, she's still a good, strong support. So I think Sydney wins over Patrick, hands down.
I agree. I'm voting for Sydney.
Yeah.
Mike?
I think they both should have been reseeded. Should have been both low seeds. I'm going to go with Sydney, though.
You think Sydney's a low seed?
I do.
Oh.
Well, I think she's a contender. But
could have been a contender. But
okay, Sydney moves on.
We'll see next round what you guys say, because she's a very different character than a lot of these other sidekicks that we've got. So I'm interested to see what happens. All right, next one is going classics on both of them. We got Barney Fife versus Gilligan from Gilligan's Island. Obviously,
this is probably the hardest matchup in the first round, I think.
All right, Mike, were you Barney Fife or was that Paul?
I'm Gilligan.
You're Gilligan.
Brian's Barney.
Okay. Man, I screwed that one up. All right, Mike, we'll start with you. Go ahead and give us Gilligan.
Oh, so first off, the show's not called the Barney Fife Show. It's called Gilligan's Island, because while he is the sidekick, he is also the main character of the show. He's constantly serving as the sidekick figure, most of the time to the skipper, occasionally to the professor and the other characters that are stuck on the island doing chores for the Howls, getting the group into constant strange situations. And that you imagine that show without Gilligan is completely unwatchable. However, Bob Denver's performance is fantastic, and he's constantly helping out people. And like you said with Launchpad, he is a lot of times lucking into the correct situation. But with this show, that is the comedy. The comedy is how can Gilligan's wacky antics somehow come back to work?
All right. Brian, what you got for Barney?
Okay, I think you could take Mike's exact speech and then just autocorrect Bob Denver for Don Knotts and Barney Fife and Gilligan for Barney Fife, and his whole speech would still count for Barney Fife in the Andy Griffith Show. They're very similar types of characters, and honestly, it'd be hard to pick between these two because it's the same kind of thing. He's not always a yes man. He does sometimes want to act tough and all that kind of stuff, and he often backs himself into doing the right thing, or he tries to do the right thing and fails comedically, and they both have the physical humor, and they're both very loyal to whoever they're with. And it's just, I don't know, as I'm talking right now, I'm debating which one I'm voting for, even though I'm Barney Fife, because they're both basically the same character.
Here, let me help you guys. Who is the villain of Gilligan's Island?
Being stuck on the island.
And who is the main perpetrator of keeping them stuck on the island? If you want to say he's a sidekick to the conflict, you're right, because time after time, it's Gilligan's fault that they have a good idea that they might get off, and he ruins it and keeps them there.
Okay, but that's the bit of the show.
It is.
And I would say, I don't know, growing up watching the Andy Griffith Show, Barney Fife is very much usually the one that creates the problem too, and Andy kind of has to bail him out half the time. So yeah. I don't know. I think there you have to understand competency doesn't really factor in when you're talking about the comedic role. We're not just evaluating their efficacy as a sidekick, but also their probably even more importantly, their characters that they play. And he is technically a sidekick. He's also a great character, even though he's a screw up.
Yeah, I don't think when you think about it, Andy Griffith, and I don't think his name was Griffith in the show, but he's not a very funny character by himself. He's funny when he's contrasted by the absurdity of Don Knotts.
Now, that is what really wins it for me. Bob Denver does do it really well. He's great in his role.
No,
you can't, Mike.
That Barney Fife is only in 162 episodes of the nearly 250 episodes of the Andy Griffith Show.
Really?
So he's not even in nearly 100 of those episodes.
That's shocking.
The show? I didn't know that.
So when you say the show's not as good without him, they did bring in other characters like Goober Pyle to kind of fill that role.
Yeah, but Goober and Gomer, I don't know. They're
sounds like Jump the Shark.
They were part of it.
There's almost 90 episodes he's not in. Just pointing it out.
But I'm saying if him leaving the show.
Point.
Yeah. True.
I think it comes down to definitions, and for me, it's one of those I think of who would I want as a sidekick, and that's probably dictates my choices that I've made. And really, I don't think I'm picking either of these guys as a sidekick, but I really like Don Knotts, and I like him over Bob Denver, and that was the tiebreaker for me.
That's what it comes down to for me too. Is I think Barney is a better character than Gilligan by a hair, but I think I do like Gilligan too. So
yeah, I'm sticking with Barney, even though as I was just defending him, I was also saying I don't know if I'm going to vote for him.
Yeah. And if you guys can't see the video that we've got of this, but if you could, you would have watched Mike die slowly on the inside with a smile on his face as we all wrecked his dreams.
So again, these both should have been 1 seats. Oh.
I posted them in the order that they appeared. Gilligan was listed last on your list.
Fair enough.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you thought that the Barney Fife versus Gilligan was a pretty close matchup, you will have 2 very drastically different characters next. We've got Dwight Schrute from The Office versus Richard Alpert from Lost. Not
Dwight
a lot of
has some
overlap.
similarities.
You what?
I think Dwight has some similarities. He's not as clownish. But
I think Dwight would love a chance at the Richard Alpert role on the island.
oh, you're saying between the two of, because I'm saying Dwight actually compares to Barney and Gilligan a little bit.
I'm comparing Dwight and Richard, and
yes. Okay.
There's not a lot of overlap.
Totally different. You go first.
I can go first because Richard is one of my characters. So I really love Richard. One of the things that I love about him, and this is going to admit to some bias here and probably isn't good for his overall score as the sidekick, but when he was introduced, there was just a lot of mystery about him. And what was great about that mystery is that he was very self-assured and secure of his role on the island, despite there being such turmoil and chaos from the things that we saw. What we saw with the others when he first comes on the scene is we're starting to get a peel back in season 3 of what's going on in this others camp. Now that Locke is able to infiltrate it and we see a little bit more of their everyday life, and we realize they're not this cohesive unit that we thought they were, and that there's a lot of these internal politics, especially between Ben and the rest of the others, and keeping them in line and keeping up appearances. But yet Richard isn't bothered by any of that. He's there and he's steady and he's this consistent personality type. And as the show goes on, we still get this very consistent, confident sort of person. And the only times that we see that start to break is once Jacob dies and he starts to have his faith in Jacob and the whole and everything that he's lived for the last 100 and some years thrown into question. And that's fair that's going to shake anyone's confidence. But I really like to see he did serve unwaveringly. He had such a strong faith in Jacob and in what the island represented, because he saw firsthand what it did for him and the second chance that it gave him. So he was able to give his entire life to the good of what was going on in this island. And so I really appreciate someone who's going to fight like that and to just be okay with the crazy over emotional Ben who's scheming and manipulative and all that stuff. He's like, you know what? I'm just going to do what I do, and I'm going to do it the best of my abilities because this is my job. I think there's something to be said about that.
Okay, well, before I jump into my case for Dwight, I would like to just state that I did watch the first 6 seasons of Lost, and
there's only 6.
There is only 6? Okay, then
yes.
The first. I didn't watch the last one, so I watched the first 5 seasons of Lost. I had to Google who Richard Alpert was because I did not remember him from the show. And... And on top of that, when I Googled him, I'm like, oh, it's the guy from the morning show.
Janko? Is that his name on there?
Yes. So, he's like
actually,
the weather
Paul,
guy.
I think you may have only watched the first 4 seasons, and he really becomes more prominent in the last 2 seasons.
Okay, well, that would explain it then. So
I don't think you're going to switch and vote for mine.
I will not be voting for Richard Alpert. I don't know. I think Dwight is actually not one of my favorite characters on The Office. In fact, when we did the rankings, I think I do something to make sure that he ended up getting top 2.
No, because you basically made sure that I didn't put him at number 1, which I actually was thinking about putting Dwight as number 1.
Yeah.
When it came to number 3, you put Dwight at number 3, making me choose between Michael and Kevin for number 1.
Right. Yes.
Because I was trying to avoid it not being super obvious. Oh, Michael's number 1, but I can't choose Michael over Kevin. I could choose Dwight over Michael.
A lot of people love Dwight as he's the favorite Office character. I am not a Dwight stan by any stretch of the imagination, but as far as sidekicks go, I think he's one of the ultimate sidekicks, because he is loyal to Michael somehow, even though there are moments where that's put into question. His character is complex. He's not your Charles Boyle, who's just, like, I'm going to do whatever for the boss. And then, like, at the end, it turns out he actually has some competency as manager too. And so you get the full spectrum. He's a zany character, but he's also, serious at times. He's also a good friend to Pam occasionally. There's so many levels to Dwight. He's one of the best characters in television history, and he is a quintessential sidekick.
Counterpoints. First of all, he is loyal to the title of manager, because at multiple points he does try and go around Michael's back to get that role, and he's not always completely loyal to Michael. As soon as he goes on the job interview and makes it sound like Dwight has the job, he shuts off his music as he's walking out and like, this party time is over. Who's ready to work? Second counterpoint is that when he becomes a competent manager, that's his third time around at that job. First time Dwight was when Michael goes on the job interview and he paints the office black and does his history of paper lessons. Second time, he fires a gun in the office. Third time, he finally gets it. Maybe he's actually better. So at what point in time are we putting Dwight as the sidekick?
Counterpoint. You say he's loyal to the title. He was never as loyal to Andy as he was to Michael.
Yep.
That's because Andy sucks. And this is someone who is Andy Bernard.
You are an Andy stan.
I am, but I'm still going to say it.
To be clear,
you're reaching here. Okay.
Matt loves Andy from seasons 3 to 6.
Yes.
Here's the simple truth. If we pick Richard Alpert here, that is a travesty. Okay, that is an absolute travesty. There is no way that Dwight Schrute should lose to Richard Alpert.
Don't bully the votes. Don't bully the votes.
No, I am voting for Dwight, but for very different reasons than Paul. Okay, than Paul thinks. Okay, I'm going to do a flashback, and then we're going to give Mike a chance to talk in a minute here. Like 3 years ago, when we first started this podcast, we did an episode where me and Matt were talking about our favorite Christmas episodes. And Matt chose The Constant as one of his favorite Christmas episodes, which I was like, you know what? Great episode of Lost. It's not really a Christmas episode. There's a Christmas tree in one scene, and that's about it. Same thing here. Richard Alpert, great character, awesome character, very complex. He's not really a sidekick. Who is he a sidekick to? He doesn't.
Jacob.
He doesn't. He kind of, but he barely. We see him interact with Jacob once.
Yeah, but he's the number 2 to Jacob. He follows Jacob's orders through the liaison of whoever is controlling the others.
I think both of these examples are Matt using a little bit of a stretch to talk about Lost, which, hey, I love Lost. I'm all for it. Richard Alpert, if it was a different competition, he might win my vote. But as a sidekick, no, he's not a sidekick.
Don't go after my character, after my decision-making process.
Matt, you're going to vote for Dwight, and we all know that.
Mike, what do you think?
So I did have 2 questions for Matt. Brian answered my first one, is how many scenes are Richard Alpert and Jacob actually in together? And then the second question I have is more broad. Would he be more of a sidekick, or is he more of an envoy or an employee of Jacob?
He's both. Like I kind of actually put him as sidekick almost like to the island, because like Jacob is the epitome of the good of the island. And so even though he might not have as much with Jacob, because let's be honest, Jacob doesn't have that many scenes, period. And so he has a lot more of like the heart of the island. He's fighting for the good. Lost is that metaphor. It's all representative. And so it's not so much about the actual character, it's the representation. And he's loyal to the representation of good.
Are you really voting for Richard Alpert, Matt?
That was a well-put argument, Matt, and I'm voting for Dwight.
Thank you. Mike, I appreciate that. I don't fault you guys for voting for Dwight.
Are you voting for Richard Alpert, Matt?
Yes, I'm voting for Richard.
That's a disgrace. Okay.
You're
This could have been our first shutout.
That should have been a shutout.
No,
that was the most lopsided match in the entire thing.
The The next one that's definitely going to be a shutout is Blue from Blue's Clues versus Al Borland. All right.
I am keeping a completely open mind on this one. I do not have any preconceptions over who I'm going to choose. It's all based on your arguments.
I need a second to cool down. Who picked Al Borland? Because
I had preconceived notions, just so we're clear.
I chose Al Borland.
Okay, go ahead, Brian.
It took me a minute to think about him. So to recap, Al Borland, played by Richard Karn in the '90s hit Home Improvement. He was literally the sidekick to Tim on Tool Time. He says, "I'm Tim the Toolman Taylor. This is my assistant Al," and we all know the shtick is that Tim is going to screw things up or try to get more power or be clumsy, and Al, he steps in when he needs to, but he's just kind of the audience surrogate. He's just going to stand back and watch it. He did the Jim to the camera before Jim was Jim, kind of thing, and it's he's going to let Tim go because he knows for the most part nothing major is going to happen. It's going to be safe, but he'll be the one to kind of look at the camera and say I don't think so, Tim, was kind of his catchphrase. Yep. And that kind of goes along with not always being a yes man. He's not always yeah, Tim, that's awesome. Glue a board to your head. But he will allow Tim to do what he's got to do. He keeps the show going, keeps the ratings going. Because I think Al knows that if this goes the way it's supposed to, where they just do a how-to and everything's great, that's not ratings. People are watching that show to see how Tim's going to screw up. So he's subtly keeping them employed while also keeping an eye on Tim and keeping him safe.
He does correct Tim's tactics a lot. You're right in that he's not a yes man of okay, whatever. He's well, actually, this is the way. And then if Tim's no, we're going to do it this way, he's all right, let me stand back. Let me see what you do.
Mm-hmm.
I do love Al. Al is a fantastic character. When you picked him, I'm great sidekick choice.
Yeah.
I'll give you that.
He had the times where Tim would say something offensive and he just hold up a card saying, "Send all your complaints to Tool Time and this is the address."
That was a great show. That was a great show within a show. Probably the best show within a show on TV history. Mm. All right. Well, Blue is a fantastic character. He's a fun novelty pick for this because, first of all, who doesn't love a dog? Having man's best friend as a sidekick is already a step up on the competition. But he's not just some dog. Blue is the smartest dog in the history of television. Not only does Blue know what it wants and is able to communicate it effectively, it also communicates it by having word association with the thing that it wants. It creates this paper, these Blue's Clues, and finds three unrelated things to put them together to say, this is what I'm communicating. What dog is able to have that sort of complex thinking? So you have a loyal dog that's kind and considerate and also is a great communicator. Of course, you've got a fantastic companion and sidekick. So I think if we're talking about just pure sidekick, Blue has to be in the conversation.
Okay, I want to just point out the fact that Matt kind of shot himself in the foot when he said Grogu is basically a pet. And then he goes to Blue's Clues and his number one pick is a literal dog. Okay, based on your arguments, I am going to go with Al Borland. I think Al is the quintessential straight actor, to Tim's craziness. He's over the top sincere. He's never funny. He never has a sense of humor, which is what makes him such a great character. And he's absolutely competent compared to Tim's idiocy. I think he fits the bill for the perfect sidekick.
Mike, what do you got, buddy?
I got a question just asking, because it's been a while since I've seen Home Improvement. My memory is that Al Borland is much more Tim's sidekick on Tool Time, the fictional show within Home Improvement, than he is an actual Home Improvement, right? Within the actual show Home Improvement, he's far less of a sidekick.
Yeah,
kind of.
He has a little bit of the Charles Boyle personality. Honestly, if we're talking about this in real life, he has a lot more of the energy and excitement and optimism than he does on the show.
Al he does appear frequently off the tool time. He still is a friend with the family and everything. And off tool time, he's more of like kind of like Charles Boyle, kind of like a dorky nerd who loves dad jokes and like it has like an ugly sense of style and thinks he's cool, but he's just like a big dork
and lives with his mom.
True. But he is like very kind of like Marshall, how you said Marshall will do anything for everybody. That is Al. If any of the characters need something from Al, he'll like, yes, absolutely, I'm there for you.
All right, well, I'm voting for Al. I don't want to talk about Blue anymore.
Matt, you shot yourself in the foot there.
Well, I'm going to vote for Al too because he's such a great character. I do think Blue is a fantastic vote for this, and if anyone would have voted, that would have been cool. I still would have voted for Al just because I really like Al Borland.
All right.
First shutout. There we go. All right. Now
Al Borland. It took Al Borland to go unanimous. That's good.
Now,
no, it took not Blue to go unanimous. Just so
fair enough.
When we were submitting our picks, someone asked this question. I can't remember who asked this, but I moved the whole thing over here. Okay, but we have Turkleton, and someone asked, is he the sidekick or is JD from Scrubs? And I think that's a fair question. But he's going against Jesse Pinkman from Breaking Bad.
And technically his name is Christopher Turk.
Who put Turkleton? You're absolutely right. I didn't even think about it. I'm like,
that's what Mike
joke within the show because
that's what Kelso calls him.
Yeah, Kelso called him that. Yeah.
You have to understand that I'm not a Scrubs guy, so.
Listen, I'm Ron Burgundy. I just read what is in front of me and I don't question it.
I was really curious how long that was going to keep up.
Okay, all right. Let me go first because I have a feeling how this is going to go because I know you guys all love Scrubs. I knew this was going to be a tough matchup for that reason, but I think that Jesse is such a captivating character. And he's not loyal to the point of like a lot of the other characters that we talk about. That's not his superpower as a sidekick. Now there were certainly moments of loyalty, like when he needed to kill the other chemist for Walt. He came through there and did it, but that was also out of self-preservation. And, when Walt betrayed him and ultimately let his girlfriend die, that was, a defining moment in their relationship that changed things. So it's not this perfect partnership. However, I think where Jesse is unique is that his character is probably different than anybody else on this list, in that he is certainly the most complex character on this list and a really good foil almost to Walt while being the sidekick at the same time. Having obviously no chemistry ability, he's learning this process and makes himself useful. And then initially you look at it as like, Walt is the sympathetic character and Jesse is the loser idiot. And by the end of the show, that has completely flipped. And Walt is the loser idiot and Jesse is the sympathetic character. And I just think that's such an incredible dynamic. And I don't know, he's one of my favorite television characters ever. And I think he's just as much a reason for the success of that show as Walt.
It's crazy to think they were originally going to kill him in the first season, and then they changed their minds.
Complex is definitely the word to use for his character, especially in this bracket. All right, Brian, you were Turk?
No, Mike was Turk.
Gosh, dang it.
So what I'll say about Turk is that Turk is also a little different than many of the other characters that we've talked about. I put him much more in the camp of Marshall Erickson than I would a character like we've mentioned Charles Boyle or Barney Fife, where he is competent. And that also the thing that makes them special is just how close he is to the main character, that they are best friends, that they are partners and everything, and that he is the side character in the show, or sidekick in the show, because we're seeing everything through JD's story. Like, it is JD's story that Chris Turk is participating in. But that he is a fully fleshed out character, that he doesn't have to go with JD, and that he does regularly tell JD no on things. They happen to work together, and therefore they're best friends who are together all the time. It's also one of the best bromances in the history of TV. So you do have the main character, and you have his best friend who he has a healthy friendship with.
Okay.
I did routinely think of too, though, as we're talking about this, and that there is a little joke even within the show that JD is having a fantasy, and in his fantasy, Turk is dressed up as Batman, and that he's Robin. And that he says, "Oh, how low is my own self-esteem that I'm, Robin in my own fantasy." And Turk looks at him and goes, "Well, it could be worse. You could be Alfred the Butler." And it flips, and of course, as soon as it pictures, is Alfred the Butler.
Mike, you just brought up what my point was, which was, yeah, the show is told through JD's point of view, but within their duo, Turk is the lead. I think that's clear. At one point,
It's JD's
Elliot
stories.
What is it?
They're JD's stories. They're not Turk's stories. They're not things that Turk's struggling with. They're not things that Turk is going through. They're things that JD is going through, and that JD is his partner and is assisting him in the struggles that he's going through. I mean,
they
you
all
take
have
it back.
struggles.
The point about you could change the perspective could be true of any of these characters. I mean, the Coach Beard could be, if you change Ted Lasso to be how weird and zany is his super hyper active positive boss. Like, you could do that to any character.
Right, but I don't think the question is who's the storyteller. I think out of the pairing, which one is the alpha and which one is kind of the follower.
Yeah, I don't know if you have an
think that's
alpha
a valid
and a
question.
beta there. I don't think you have an alpha and a beta. I think you do have a partnership, but in that partnership, you do have JD who's going through things, and that he's bringing along his best friend. So in the show, Turk is most definitely the sidekick character because he's the one that's supporting his best friend as his best friend goes through things.
Yeah, I think that Turk is, in the relationship itself, neither one is the alpha. I think you're absolutely right, because JD and Turk are different people, and at different points they take the lead on stuff, and at different points they have their own little things that they're supporting the other guy with. And I think that's such a great relationship. But Turk knows how to be supportive. He's supportive to Carla. He's probably, well, actually, that's a relationship too. Like, Carla is such a strong woman. There's a lot of times that she is the alpha, but there are definitely times in the relationship she's not. And so Turk knows how to be an alpha in the room. He also knows how to support the person in there. So I think he fits in your criteria, Mike, because he is the sidekick in the JD story.
I will say there's one point where it's kind of a funny joke. They're playing basketball, then it cuts to JD just waking up, laying on the ground, and Turk's laying next to him. He's like, "What happened?" And Turk just goes, "Oh, you knocked yourself unconscious with the ball, so then I just laid next to you so people would think we're just chilling."
Yeah, and that's a great sidekick. See, when we started this category here, I really wanted to pick Jesse because I think Jesse's the better character overall. But we're not asking about what's the better character. This was your guys' complaint about Richard Alpert, I think, specifically Brian. That you're not asking what's the better character.
Yeah.
We're asking what's the better sidekick. And even though I love Jesse, and he does have a good loyalty, he's not only loyal to Walt, he is loyal to Jane. He gets kind of tricked into becoming loyal to Gus when he goes on all the runs with Mike. And so he's really good at being loyal to the people that have shown themselves that he should have loyalty to. But even though he's quintessential sidekick, he's not the level of sidekick that Turk is. Turk is really good at supporting. Jesse tries really hard. He has a good heart for some of the stuff that he does, but I just can't put him over Turk for sidekick.
Okay, see, I would argue that we are arguing which one is the better character that is a sidekick. That's kind of been my criteria in my mind as we've been going through that. Like, which one is, because they have to offer something to the show. They can't just be a good support and a good partner. They have to bring interest. And I'm not saying that Turk doesn't. I'm not a Scrubs guy at all. I think the the quality of the actual character that they play should be a high factor in this decision too.
It could be, but at the same time, I think you also have to be saying like Matt was saying, is it a sidekick? Like, yeah, like if we're doing the Office, it was Michael Scott. Like, yeah, great character, not a sidekick. Kind of like with Richard, great character, not a sidekick.
Yes,
And
yes, has to be a sidekick.
But Jesse is. He is.
Jesse
is for
and,
sure.
You know, it's funny. When Paul was making his argument towards Jesse, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go for Jesse. But I think that Mike and Matt have convinced me, and I'm gonna go with Turk on this one.
I knew this was gonna happen. Okay, that's fine.
No, I was all on board for Jesse.
Listen,
at first.
It makes me sad because I like Jesse.
You guys are
me
wrong,
too.
but it's okay. I knew that was gonna happen. You guys love Scrubs.
Listen,
Since that's the end of the first. Sorry,
our best villain was a Breaking Bad Better Call Saul villain, so we can avoid having our best sidekick be one as well.
Since that's the end of the first round, did you guys have any honorable mentions, other ones that you were considering?
I did. Dang it! What? I had
So
a list in my head.
Last minute, I switched out Screech for Gilligan.
Okay.
But I also thought at different times about Spock, Gus from Psych, Diggle from the show Arrow, Foggy Nelson from Daredevil, and Robin from Batman.
I had Robin from the animated series Batman. I did have I literally just thought of it. It just fell out of my freaking brain. Hang on.
So, because just to avoid all the Brian only talks about Muppets and Power Rangers, I avoided Fozzie Bear and Alpha 5.
Well, we still found a way to get that in there.
But they're not in the bracket.
Riker. That was because you said Spock, and I would have picked Riker over Spock. I didn't watch enough MASH, but I remember his Hawkeye's relationship with why am I blanking?
Trapper or BJ?
Trapper. Yeah.
The only other one that I thought of was Ron Swanson. That he would have been. You could make a case for him being a good sidekick for Leslie.
I was going to go Ann Perkins.
Yeah, Ann would be great too. Mm-hmm.
I couldn't really decide who was a good sidekick from that show. I also could have considered Troy from Troy and Abed on Community. Would have been good. He's definitely the sidekick of that pairing.
Weirdly, which is funny because I actually thought of Abed.
Really, I think Troy's the bigger character of the show, but within their duo, Abed leads.
That's
Agreed.
such a hard one because I can see it going either way. There are definitely times Abed leads, and there's definitely times that Troy leads. I did mention. I mentioned in our group too, Scooby-Doo. He was one that I thought of as well.
Yeah.
You see, after ripping Grogu as basically being an animal, you were considering two different dogs.
Scooby-Doo didn't last long. That's the reason I did it. I really like Blue, and we don't talk about Blue too much. Why should we? We're not a kids show.
Yeah, why should we? Exactly. Okay.
Oh, I did consider Bingo from Bluey, but then I figured that's just too confusing.
Okay, well now as since this was what I wanted in the first place, and since I have the list, I'm taking over Matt's hosting duties for round 2. And the next matchup, and I think for round 2, we should really limit our arguments because we've made our arguments pretty much for all these characters. And so we're kind of to the decision process here. This first one is going to be an interesting matchup. We've got a 1 versus 2 seed. This is Beard versus Charles Boyle. So both extremely loyal characters.
Weird.
I'll say the only differentiator that I have here is I think Beard, the quality that pushes him over Charles is his ability to be honest and direct. For example, when they needed to bench Roy in season 1, and Ted didn't want to do it. He wouldn't do it. And it was Beard and Nate that basically said, no, we're not going to let you do this. This is the wrong decision. And he had the courage to stand up to him. And I don't think that, I'm sure it's happened in the series, but I don't think that Boyle has that same quality that with Jake that Beard would with with Ted.
That's not entirely true because there's a number of times that Boyles challenges Jake, but he doesn't do it in a challenging way. He does it in a weirdly enabling, optimistic way that is like, oh wait, is he disagreeing with him? That it's just like he does this. He goes so far to one side, but because Jake respects him, that Jake will be able to hear it and hear what he's actually saying. And so I still think Boyle, because I don't find Beard to be as interesting of a character to me.
You gave a very abstract, non-existent example. I gave a real, tangible example. So I'm going to stick with Beard.
All right, whatever.
Mike, what do you think?
I mean, I think just looking at if both characters were to be removed from their show and the rest of the show were to go on without that sidekick, which show would suffer more? And I think that Ted Lasso would suffer more without Beard than Brooklyn Nine-Nine would without Boyle. I really like both of those shows, but I could really imagine Brooklyn Nine-Nine without Boyle. I can't imagine Ted Lasso without Beard.
Fact.
Even though Boyle was mine, I am also going to go with Beard. And to Mike's thing, with Brooklyn Nine-Nine, I think the only two characters you could not take out of the show are Jake and Captain Holt. I think the show would suffer without any of the characters. It would suffer without Boyle, but it could be done without Boyle.
Done. Beard moves on. Okay, we're moving to the Western Division. This is an interesting matchup. These are two very different characters. But one of mine was Marshall Erickson. And then he was the 4 seed coming in with the big upset against the number 2 seed, Sydney, from our new cooking show. So, Matt, you want to go first?
Yep. Even though Sydney's my pick, I'm saying Marshall.
Wow. I was actually going to say, even though Marshall's my pick, I'm going with Sydney. I really love Sydney. I think she's an amazing character. So, there you go.
She is. For all the reasons I said earlier, she's so level-headed. She's really smart. But, if I have one of them in my corner, Marshall's a little more dopey, but he's not an idiot. I do like Marshall. I'd rather have Marshall in my corner, I think, than Sydney.
That's fair. I'm sticking with Sydney.
Brian, I don't have as much experience with the Bears, so what do you think?
I say Sydney as well, because when you really look at it, I know I was all for Marshall, and I do like How I Met Your Mother more than I like The Bear, just the shows. But okay, that restaurant would not have succeeded. They would not have had the success they did without Sydney. And I think that's just how it is. And she fills in the gaps for what he needs. And I think he even realizes that there could come a time when she surpasses him. And I think she's definitely learning from what the greatest cheater she can at the moment. And I think she is a great sidekick.
Yeah, and she's as great of a sidekick as Richie is. So, Mike, what do you think?
I'm just going to go with Marshall Erickson. The man already watched a field goal go wide left, and he just, he needs this one. He needs this one.
All right, here we go.
Gary Anderson.
Let's see if Gary Anderson. It is Marshall Erickson moving on.
I've never been so happy to lose.
All right. So that means we are into the North Division. Two kind of dopey characters. We have the classic Barney Fife, played by Don Knotts, and Dwight Schrute from The Office, of course.
This is a hard
Rainn
one.
Wilson.
Dwight, without a doubt. When he got fired, Michael, and he went to Staples, The Office suffered. Michael realized the error of his ways, and he had to come back crawling on his hands and knees. And not literally, of course, but that moment just showed how instrumental Dwight was to The Office, how much he cared for The Office. And it was the same Richard Alpert type thing, that it's almost like, he was loyal to Michael, but he was loyal to The Office. He was loyal to the Dunder Mifflin Paper Company to keep that afloat and doing what it takes. So I think he wins.
I think Don Knotts is a great character, or Barney Fife is a great character. Don Knotts did a great job playing him, but he's a little bit one note compared to Dwight, who's a much more interesting character. And and I think fits the role of sidekick better too.
Mike, what do you got?
I'm going to go kind of the opposite of what Paul just said. I think that Dwight does a lot of things besides just being a sidekick. And even though it's hard to say anything bad about Don Knotts, but I probably do prefer Rainn Wilson's Dwight a little bit more. However, as far as sidekick, Barney is so iconic. I've got to vote for Barney.
I'll make it a 3-1. I'm going to go with Dwight. Kind of what Matt was saying, he's loyal to The Office. And I remember in one of the last episodes, there's a conversation Jim has with David Wallace, and Jim says, if there's anybody who loves selling paper more than Dwight, I don't want to meet that person.
That's good. Okay, last division is the South Division. It's Al Borland against Turk. This is going to be interesting characters. So let's see. The 2 seed, the high seed is Turk. So we'll let Mike go first.
So kind of the same thing I said earlier. You got one of TV's great bromances here. You got 2 characters who are in lockstep most of the time. And when they're not, you can tell that there's some division in that relationship. And because it is much more of a relationship than any other sidekick that we have here. It's a good, healthy, friendship, and that they're supportive of each other. And Turk is always there for JD, even if it's from a distance. I mean, just from the original episode, we see that, Turk is telling him that he's got to branch off on his own. But by the end of it, he's grabbed the keys to their apartment out of JD's bag because he's always going to be there for JD.
I agree with everything you're saying, but I'm still going to go with Al because it just the deciding factor for me is that if Al was only on the Tool Time segments, I'd probably have to go with Turk. But he is a great friend and a great sidekick to Tim and his whole family and Wilson and everybody off the show as well. He is really that utility player who helps everybody. And I hate saying that because I love Scrubs, and Turk would probably win in a matchup against a lot of people, but I think Al has this one.
See, that's what's the deciding factor for me the other way, is that the off-screen personality of Al Borland is a little bit too much of a sad sack. Not completely, but I mean, just the fact that he's that old, living with his mom, he's single, he spends more time with 4 others, which is a great characteristic of a sidekick, but the fact that he can't be strong enough in his own life makes me go with Turk because he is a great sidekick, but also good at being himself and fighting for himself as well.
Can I make a point? You say that Al doesn't do anything for himself. Throughout the series, Al gets engaged twice in the series, but
they don't stick. That's
the second one does.
Ross Geller gets divorced 3 times. All right, what are we talking about here?
And you know what? He ends up with Rachel in the end, just like Al's second. In the finale, he gets married.
Who says that's the end? They're going to break up a year later. We don't know.
Well, you know what? It's the reboot, so he can never tell. Which we just found out this week will never happen.
Okay, well, I need to cast the deciding vote here, and I guess what it kind of comes down to for me is I've tried to watch Scrubs, and it just fails to captivate me, and I do resonate with the idea that I think in that pairing, I don't see Turk as the sidekick. Maybe that's my experience with the show.
Would you feel more sympathetic for him if you found out he only has 1 testicle?
That's true.
And might, but listen, this is not about sympathy. So my vote's going to go for Al, and we're going to cast the die here and find out. Let's see, we need odd for Turk because he's the high seed, and even for Al because he's the low seed. Here we go. It is even. So Al, it's a 4.
I like Al.
I think you just said it the other way, though, didn't you?
No, he didn't.
I think you're right. I think you said it the other way.
I said odd. You can check the tape, but I said odd has the high seed. That's the way I've been doing it the whole time.
All right, listeners, go back and fact check Paul.
Yeah, hit that 30-second back. Okay.
So now, do we each
guys,
do all 4 of us have one of our picks in the final 4, or how does that?
No, I voted against mine. I got nothing.
I got one of mine
either.
So it's 3 Paul, 1 me.
Yep. All right, so let's start with 2 of mine. We have Beard and Marshall. They're both mine, but I'm gonna let Matt make the case for
Marshall.
because he is I know that he's the true Marshall fan. I'm gonna say that well, I love Marshall as a character. Obviously, I picked him. I think Beard is the more interesting character, and I think he's more critical to the show, where How I Met Your Mother is more of an ensemble cast, and each of those people play, a significant role. But you can't really have Ted Lasso without Beard, and I'd say he's more of a stereotypical sidekick than Marshall, even though Marshall's more just a good friend to everybody else. So, but I wouldn't be heartbroken either way.
How I Met Your Mother without Marshall. I don't. You say that about ensemble cast. Honestly, Marshall's more pivotal to things than Ted is. You just wouldn't have the through line of How He Met Your Mother, but of all the heart of the episodes, Marshall is required in it. What does a good sidekick do? Is a good sidekick fights for people to have their best life, to be able to succeed, whether it's like superheroes or whether to thrive and do well in business, like Dwight does for Michael, or Richard does for the island,
or win a soccer game.
Or maybe win a soccer game. You're right. I mean, there's a reason he made it this far. But Marshall, he shoots for success. Like, you find this the most, like when they're fighting. There's the one Christmas episode when Lily and Ted are fighting, and that Marshall, he should pick a side with his wife, and he does in a way, but he also picks a side of, you guys like each other. He's the one that brings them back together. He's not like, Ted, you need to figure this out with my wife. He's like, no, you like her. Remember, you're friends. And Lily, you like him. You're friend. This is stupid. We shouldn't be this way. Even with Lily's dad, like he has a lot of reasons that Lily got him out of his life, but Marshall still's like, he's still your dad. There's still something there. And so there's a lot that you see of Marshall trying to bring people together, to forge these connections, and that these connections would fall apart if he wasn't there. And that, to me, is a success of the show of How I Met Your Mother. It's all about the relationship connections. He's sidekick.
Definitely the glue guy. I mean, there's no question about that. He is the glue guy of that group. But I don't think he naturally fits the sidekick. Like, I don't see him as like he is the sidekick. And like we even talked about earlier, which I referenced as a positive, part of it is he's like a secondary role to all of these different characters, but he's not really a sidekick to anybody. I don't think he quite fits the criteria as well.
Ted wouldn't have met the kid's mother without Marshall. Ted did meet the kid's mother without Coach Beard. Checkmate.
That's not how checkmate.
That's exactly how it works. Let's move on.
Okay, that last point is nonsense, but I'm gonna agree with you. I'm gonna go with Marshall, and I think the episode that really gets me thinking for Marshall is the second Thanksgiving episode, where we have Lily's dad coming for Thanksgiving, and he gives the slap, and like it starts a whole chain of every character gives the slap to the next person until it comes back to Marshall, and he's like, I gave this slap to get everyone together and to bring us together as a family. And then he smacks Barney in the face. It shows how he did something took something as dumb as a slap bet and used it to mend all the fences that day.
One last thing that is also a credit to a character like Turk is that he also has this buy-in. It's the same with Charles Boyle that I like.
Turk lost.
I know, but I like these characters that naturally buy in, that like someone says something and it's the yes and, like an improv. Like, Lily's show, it's such a stupid show. No one is there enjoying it except for Marshall. And then they even do the thing with Ted, and then Marshall's like, oh my gosh, Ted's in the show. Guys, Ted's in the show. Like, he lets himself enjoy the things that his friends care about. And it helps them feel better about them, because you have someone in your life who's like, yeah, I'll care about this thing just as much as you care about it.
I would say that Beard does that too, though. Like when Ted suggests something tactically, or he has this idea, like Beard is like instantly the one, not only to support it, but to figure out how to make it work logistically. And I think
That's fair.
Part of
I'll
why
give
he's
you
a
that.
great sidekick.
You're
So
welcome.
I'm voting for Marshall. So I'm glad that we could have that really long argument there.
Okay.
But I like Beard. I love Marshall.
All right. Fair enough. All right. So Marshall moves on to the final round against either Dwight or Al.
Oh my gosh.
So let's see. That's Al is Brian, but Dwight's the high seed, so I'll go first.
Okay.
I think between the two characters, I think Dwight is just frankly more interesting than Al as a character. There's no question he's a better character than Al over the course of the series. I think he's also they demonstrate similar traits as far as like actual competency. Like they're not perfect, but they also kind of have a relative understanding of what they're supposed to do, and their role is important to either the show or to the office. But Dwight does it in a far more entertaining way. And I think like Al had a great relationship with Tim, but doesn't really play well with any of the other characters on that show, where Dwight is the sidekick to Michael, but he also has a really unique story with Jim and Pam and, Angela, of course, all of these different people in the office. I just think he's a far better character. So there you go.
Okay. I'm going to stick with Al, and just because I want to see if I can avoid the top two being two of Paul's picks.
Oh, that's the best argument that you have.
I'm just starting.
Dwight because he's my pick. That's unreasonable.
No,
that's not fair.
Al is also just a very good pick. Think about it. Dwight steals the show a lot of the times. When you think of The Office, one of the first people you think about is going to be Dwight. When you think of Home Improvement, you don't necessarily think of Al, because he's in this. He's the supporting character. He's letting Tim take the spotlight. He's supporting him from a distance. He does what a sidekick does, down to when you think about the show. He doesn't take the spotlight. He gives the spotlight to the lead, which is what a good sidekick does. And everything we've talked about with Al being a good sidekick as well.
To your point, I do not agree about how you did this with Dwight. Dwight is the sidekick to Michael. He is a sidekick in a way to Jim. He is a sidekick to David Wallace, if you want to go that route. He is a sidekick to even Pam. He is definitely a sidekick to Angela. His social contemporary is Andy. That's why they have a rivalry. And so that's the level that he's operating at. He is a sidekick to at least half the office.
So is that an argument for him?
It is. I didn't like he often, you think of him and he can often be the lead in a way. Like that doesn't hold water to me.
And I would say, as far as, I think it's in the order of like the stars of the show. It's Michael, it's Jim, then it's Dwight. I know that there's some debate there too, but
I would go Michael, Dwight, Jim.
I'd go Michael, Ryan, Jim. All right, Mike, what are you doing? You going to Al or Dwight?
I gotta get my prop ready.
We can hear it.
I know. I've never opened it before till now. I'm going with Dwight. And I have a little mini Funko Pop of Dwight sitting here to show you that I'm voting Dwight.
Does his
or is
head
that
bobble?
Al with the wig and glasses and he shaved his beard?
No, it's Dwight. Very angry because he's holding a stapler that was put in Jell-O.
I think Al did a phenomenal job to get to the Final Four, I gotta say.
Yeah, he's a good character. 100%.
That was impressive. I did not see him getting to the Final Four. I would not have picked that.
It's Dwight for me too.
I knew that this was going to be the Dwight. I knew that I could vote for Al and have vote for Dwight.
And that brings us to this. To me, like, we've had some hard matchups. I think a Marshall versus Dwight final two is exactly a wonderful final two. Either of these
Yes.
people winning, to me, I'm like, yeah, that's good.
So
it's a win.
So I'm gonna say this: like, if it were Beard and Dwight, I'd advocate for Beard because I just think he's a more interesting. I think he's a great character. Because it's Marshall and Dwight, I don't really have a strong take. I'm like on the fence on this one.
So is there one of you guys that is like, it definitely has to be this over the other?
I'm thinking.
I know we
Well,
hit
I
a
wish I
hard one.
I wish I could see them interact. That would be fun.
That would be so. They are not compatible characters. I don't feel like they would click in any regard.
I think Dwight and Barney would be an entertaining duo.
Correct. I agree with that.
All right, I'll go first. I'm gonna have to call my vote for Dwight, and I know this might be hard because I love Marshall, but just think of how many different times that. So on the one hand, Dwight's not a complete yes man. There's a whole episode called "The Coup" where he went around Michael and tried to get his job with Jan. He always wanted that job. He was hungry for that job whenever he got the chance. But outside of that being a possibility, how many times did he like yes and Michael? Like he knew about Michael's plan to fake kill himself by jumping off the roof onto the bouncy house, and he went right with him on that. He went with Michael on. I just watched this episode last night on the raid to Utica when he's like, "Yeah, I got some real bombs. I got the gasoline in the bottles ready to go right here." And like you said we couldn't stop, so I'm peeing in a bottle. Like he is in all the way, and he like not only is in with Michael's plans, he's in and will escalate it too far.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
The third season, the potential of the branch closing, and they go and stake out David Wallace's house is another great example of Dwight is naturally just going to jump in there and go along with Michael's things. Like, no, he'd be more afraid of me. Okay, David Wallace. Ah!
I do love that one. Or Michael is trying to get everyone in the office to find a woman for him to date. It's like, all right, everyone, here's your Post-it notes. I expect your women by the end of the day.
So here's a negative in his sidekicking to Michael. How about you talked about the coup. There's another one that's like, is this really what Dwight thinks? In the roast of Michael Scott, when he goes up to defend him, he's like, you should be bowing before him. And then Michael's trying to shut him down. And then Dwight turns and he actually goes off on Michael. It's like, you're a small, sad man who doesn't have any land. And like, is that really how he's felt about him this whole time? And he's actually like burying this resentment he's had? Because that is a very good possibility.
No, there's no way that's true because of the wedding episode.
Oh, that's
Michael
point.
comes
Well,
back.
I think in that moment Dwight was lashing out of like embarrassment.
He was hurt.
Basically. Yeah, embarrassment and hurt.
Okay,
kind of like how he got mad at Michael and wasn't in the last Dundee song where they sang the Rent song to him because he ran off, which Dwight should have been in that scene, but that's another story.
So we have one for sure for Dwight with Brian. Anyone willing to take the leap and cast your vote? It's so hard. I like Marshall a lot, and I think if I'm saying I want a sidekick on my side, that's where he gets the vote. But I think Dwight is such an integral part of The Office, and not just the show The Office, but the actual Dunder Mifflin Paper Company office. And like what he brings to that is so strong. And I think I'm waffling, guys. I think I've got to go with my gut of Marshall. I like Dwight. I think he'd be a great pick, but I think I'm going Marshall.
What do you think, Mike?
Well, I really don't want it to come down to a dice roll because I just feel like that is it's wrong in the championship
I agree.
match. Man, I'm having a really hard time with it, though. I'm with Matt. There's so many things that Marshall brings just as a sidekick to all those characters. Is that your point earlier? That it is an ensemble show. It is an ensemble show, but it's an ensemble show where really Marshall is some of the best glue that the show has with all the characters and being the, sometimes the straight guy, sometimes the comedic relief. Sometimes he's the emotional support to all the characters. I mean, some of the most emotional scenes in How I Met Your Mother all tie back to Marshall.
Here's a question
I'll
that
go
I
with
think.
Marshall as well. I'll go with Marshall
Okay.
as well because again, I can see there's so many times that Dwight isn't the sidekick, that Dwight is the lead in that story, and there's so many stories that he is the sidekick, but there's just so many that he's not too. Whereas Marshall, like by and large, he is supporting another character in most of his scenes.
What I was going to say is I think what pushed it over the edge in my gut was that there's also a number of storylines that Dwight is the antagonist. And I think a good sidekick should probably not have that many antagonist moments on his resume.
That's a fair point. I'm still going Dwight.
Yeah. So I think, to me, the biggest thing for me is I still think that Dwight fits the stereotype of a sidekick better than Marshall does. And while I would 100% agree that if I were to pick somebody to be my sidekick, it would be Marshall, hands down, probably over anybody on this list. Al Borland might be up there, but just because he is unfailingly loyal, he's honest, he's all the good things. Who am I kidding? Let's go Marshall. Marshall for the win.
I thought you were gonna say Dwight, and then we're gonna be like, all right, everyone, send in your votes. What do you think is gonna be it? And then
I thought you were going Dwight too, and I was gonna like, am I on Paul's side in an argument? This is weird.
I almost went Dwight, but then I'm like, you know what? I blocked Dwight once already. Might as well just do it again. Block him from winning two different.
Okay, this time he's losing to Marshall, who is a fine person to lose to.
Listen, I would like to share in this win because I feel like I pushed him through as much as I could through every single round.
Okay.
No
Just
problem.
Remember that I had 3 of the last 4. So
that's I voted against myself. You voted against Marshall when you wanted Sydney.
Yep.
I would not have mind Jesse Pinkman going past the first round he did, but it's hard when you go up against the board.
Yeah.
That's his new nickname. It's a terrible nickname. All right.
I'm going to stick with that. Barney, Gilligan, Dwight, Richard Alpert. I mean, the Richard Alpert part is questionable, but the other 3, that was a strong quadrant.
Thank you for just mocking my pick. Of these 4, Matt sucked, but the other 3, they're pretty good.
Oh, yeah, the other 3 were Paul and Brian and I weren't they? I didn't put that together until the second. I was tired. But yeah, good point.
It's just like when you were. It's just like that episode a long time ago when you were calling the Constant a Christmas episode. It's like it's not Christmas. It's a great episode, but it's not Christmas.
It is. It focuses around the fact that it's Christmas. That is a major factor in the plot.
It's more. We had this debate 3 years ago.
And you're still wrong. All right, everyone, let us know, what did we get right, what did we get wrong, who should have made it to the top. Are there honorable mentions that you liked that you didn't bring up? Well, probably.
Hey, and also get your butt on Spotify or Apple Podcast and leave a rating and a review.
Yes, that's true. We are on a number of we are on Deezer, and I believe Google. No, we're not in Google Podcast. They haven't confirmed that yet. We've got a number of them. If there's a place that you go that you like the podcasts there that you listen, that was a terrible sentence. That was the worst constructed sentence ever. So you know what I mean. You know what my heart's saying.
If you want to construct better sentences than that, write them in your good review of this podcast.
Show me how to do it.
If you want more than, the people that are on this podcast to listen to this podcast, you need to review it because that's how it gets seen. That's how it's visible.
Listen, guys, sometimes I start a sentence and I don't even know where it's going to go. I just let the words fall out. All right. Well, last week, we're going to jump into trivia. And last time, we had Paul on as we talked about The Bear. We talked about that there was one character or one actor on the show who in real life is an actual chef. and he had actually consulted on the show for some of their culinary expertise and gave advice to the writers. So what actor or what character was that? And the actor is Maddie Matheson, who plays Fack, the only character really who doesn't cook on that show. So that fits.
That's amazing. Okay,
Yeah.
so this week's trivia question actually ties into two of our characters on our bracket. One of them being Marshall Erickson, who is our eventual champion, and the other is Patrick Star. The voice of Patrick Star and the man who played the father of Marshall Erickson on How I Met Your Mother, Bill Fagerbakke, also played a sidekick on, I think it was in the 80s or 90s, a TV show called Coach. And he was the sidekick to Craig T. Nelson's character. What was Bill Fagerbakke's name on the show Coach?
That character walked so that Coach Beard could run. Let's be honest. All right. Well, that's the trivia for this week. Remember, leave a comment and review, and the subscribe fairy will come visit you in your sleep, and it'll be
5-star review.
5-star. Yeah. Let's be honest. You love this show, or
Clarify.
else you wouldn't be listening every single week. So 5-star or
right.
nothing. All right. Well, until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
I'm Paul.
I'm Mike.
And we're reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.